Hello, Fort Worth Moms friends. This is Emily, and I am here today with some new friends that I have. I would like to introduce Carrie Garcia from Alliance for Children and another new friend, Wes Cunningham from ACH Child and Family Services. So I have invited them today to chat with us about a very important topic and kind of a very serious topic. We're going to be discussing the problem of child abuse here, like not only in North Texas, but even very specifically in Tarrant County. Um, a couple of housekeeping notes. We do have a section for comments, which I have pulled up. There is a notice, I believe, in our description that if you would like yourself identified whenever you submit a comment, that you need to click this StreamYard link just to verify that you're not a spam bot. And also, I'll go over at the end some other resources and different things that we have on our website and other resources that they can offer for the community. So we are going to jump into some questions we have curated here at Fort Worth Moms. And the very first question I have is, I know pre-pandemic, the numbers for Tarrant County and how we ranked in the state of Texas for reported child abuse cases was not great. We were like really at the top of that list. So now that we're kind of coming out of the pandemic, what are the current statistics for child abuse here locally?
Well, in 2021, there was over 6,500 children that had designated child abuse cases. And so typically there's approximately 3/4 of those are neglectful supervision. So the child is not being supervised properly. And then there's the remaining cases range from physical and sexual abuse, as well as medical and emotional abuse. So.
Yeah, and to stem off of what Wes had said, 6,500 is a pretty
Both of your organizations, ACH and Alliance for Children, are involved in like supporting child abuse survivors, but also trying to prevent child abuse in Tarrant County. Can you explain briefly what each of your organizations is kind of focusing on?
Yeah, their mission is to protect children and to preserve families. And so we have an array of different services. So we do have residential services that provide opportunities for kids to heal from trauma in a safe environment with individuals who are trained to address trauma. In addition to that, we also have prevention programs. So Real Help for Real Life is a free counseling program that offers services to families with children ages 6 to 17 in Tarrant County. And so those types of services, the prevention services, are really focused on developing and increasing protective factors in order to reduce the need for out-of-home placement due to abuse and neglect.
And so at Alliance for Children, essentially, we try to ensure, or we do ensure that all of our services are completely free from the initial outcry to when they go and complete their counseling services. So essentially, we will be a third party that handles all of the forensic interviews and assists with that. We partner with 31 different jurisdictions, as well as all of local law enforcement, JPS, and Cook Children's. So we have a lot of hands that we're, working together to communicate, which is one of my favorite aspects of working here, because that communication is so streamlined and efficient from the law enforcement side to the healing side to the preventative side, especially with how much the internet and social media is just constantly evolving. Our NetSmarts program, helping parents understand how to give a kid their first cell phone and what that means. for navigating that new life of technology. So certainly, just like Wes said, the preventative portion of having education on our side is extremely helpful. Going into schools, teaching kiddos and adults alike, what it looks like to report and so on and so forth.
Those are really amazing services, and I'm so thankful for both of your organizations and the dedicated and creative efforts that y'all have put into helping the children and families here in North Texas. This is also like a personal kind of interview and passion of mine because I am a child abuse survivor. I went through extensive child abuse during my years at home, and I did not have services or organizations that were available to me, or even in the small communities kind of where I lived. And so it is a heart passion of mine to continue the conversations about this and to put this topic as front and center in front of parents as we can. Because I think we have a lot of stereotypes about child abuse that are often wrapped up in how it's been portrayed in media, et cetera, and so forth. And I would be one of those kiddos who grew up in a middle class family that had very religious parents, who participated in extracurricular activities, who was valedictorian of her high school class. And yet I suffered some extreme abuse inside of my home. And so I want us to really talk very plainly today as we have the attention of parents here in North Texas. The first question I want us to go, and we're starting basically here, is what actually is child abuse?
I don't know if you want to take that away, Wes, or not. But to me, one of the things I normally focus on is any of the signs and symptoms that kind of come with what that abuse looks like, with behavioral changes, and kind of not even just the physical, because as you mentioned, Emily, it is a taboo topic. And I think everyone kind of jumps to the worst assumption. But a lot of times that abuse can be the emotional toll. It can take a lot of different shapes and variations. And so I think that's why it's so important from the educational aspect to understand where that's stemming from when a child is having behavioral changes or maybe not mentally progressing like they should be. And so that's kind of what I normally gear to when I talk about what that looks like.
Yeah, there is a very legal definition of abuse. Um, Ultimately, whenever there is an act or an omission that sort of leads to a child experiencing great harm, substantial harm that affects how they develop, and Carrie sort of mentioned that there's a response that child exhibits, and for us in the community and in homes, we're need to be sort of aware of those signs and those symptoms in order to sort of attempt to address that.
I'll ask a follow-up question there. What would you say are those signs and symptoms? I mean, Carrie kind of mentioned maybe seeing some changes in typical behavior or maybe expected developmental behaviors. What are other kind of signs and symptoms?
I know some other things that can be experienced are hygiene deficiencies, behavioral changes, maybe hostile or angry. A lot of times it can be loss of appetite, or they're not sleeping. The kind of just basic operation of the body during the day is not really functioning how they should be. Those are some of the behaviors that we normally look for, as well as if there's any new inappropriate sexual behaviors that they're happening that shouldn't be kind of paralleling to the age that they're at, right? And so those are kind of very telltale signs to look for when you're trying to, adapt to what, the new scenario is happening or being presented to you at that time.
I'm not sure that there's much that I could add other than this. I think if you have a relationship with a child, so you have a certain amount of knowledge of that child, any specific drastic change in the way that they are interacting with others socially, whether that's if they're being far more, they're staying in their room, or they're just that you see a lot more aggressive behavior when it's not normal, then those are sort of signs that you should at least pay attention to and try to figure out what's going on, which doesn't necessarily mean that there's child abuse, but there's definitely anytime that you sense that there's something different, or this child has altered their way of interaction, then that's an opportunity to have a conversation with that kid and attempt to understand what's going on with their experience.
I think those are great tips. I'm going to add something as a child who lived through that is I didn't have the maturity or the conscious like understanding of what I was trying to do. But I can think back as early as first and second grade, third grade, of trying to talk to teachers and even the counselor that I had. And I would make up stories about other people mistreating me on a bus or something like. But what I was really trying to do was trying to tell them about my home situation, but I didn't have the confidence to do that. And so I loved what you said, Wes, about how if you're noticing things, if a child is maybe trying to communicate something to you or is having differences in behavior, or maybe there's just some developmental things that seem off, problems with hygiene, is having that very kind of straightforward conversation with them to open the door to let them say what they need to really tell you. Okay, another question that
Can I
I
say
have.
can I
Oh,
say
yes, go
something? Because I just think
absolutely.
it's just super important because a lot of times you mentioned just having sort of the lack of confidence to sort of express what was actually going on. Um, that's a huge uh, undertaking for any kid. And so whenever maybe you build up the courage to actually ask that question, and maybe you're even quite direct, don't let go of it and just be like, oh, I'm off the hook. I it, Continue to observe and assess and watch that kid, because it's super important. Uh, just just being able to be there and actually continue to engage that kid to make sure that there's not something going on, because they may not say it the first time, it may not be the second time, but just simply by you being there, you're building that trust in order for that child to actually open up. So
And I think, if you don't mind, I'm going to now kind of piggyback off of that a little bit. But of course, April is Child Abuse Prevention Month. And so a lot of the educational components that our team here does is assisting the public with learning how to continue or tease out those conversations with your child. And I know we do have a lot of trainings coming up that are virtual and online for families. It's located on our social and website, but they cover everything from how to talk to your kiddo about personal body safety. Again, as I mentioned previously, about how to properly operate a cell phone or the internet. And, just some of those tougher conversations that maybe unfortunately don't come in a parenting 101 guidebook, right? So, I think we try really hard to offer public services that maybe if you're picking up on some cues but you don't really know how to start that conversation. Or as Wes said, you've noticed it a couple of times and you're not really sure how to get more information, out of the child. That is certainly some tools in your toolbox that can assist with that.
That's great info. Okay, the next question I have is for like parents with kiddos in their home, and kind of us sort of self-analyzing our relationships with our own kids. How are we handling their emotional health, their mental health, and also their physical well-being. So what is the differences between discipline and child abuse? Like, and that can go not just like, we're not just talking about spanking, but even verbal abuse, those types of things. How do y'all see the differences there?
And we have these interactions with kids several times a day over periods of time. And the thing is that parenting is really, really hard. And it's especially been hard the last couple years. And so when I think about the difference between abuse and discipline, obviously it's the outcome. Like, what is it that you're wanting to achieve through discipline? And if that desire is for closer connection with your child, then you can definitely see that there's a different focus and purpose through the act, or whatever discipline you're doing. The thing is that when you begin to think in terms of payback for your child, and I want to sort of clarify that there are patterns. Parents get angry at their children, and that is a very normal feeling when, especially if a parent feels hurt by a child's behavior, there may be that desire for payback. But if there is a pattern that has developed and over time continues to develop, then that may be a form of abuse, because it will impact your child over time. And so I think that's one of the things that I think about in terms of being a parent and having to discipline my own child. I'm looking at, like, what am I trying to achieve right now? And if I can't take away that this is payback, then I need to step back and think about how I'm going to respond to this child's behavior.
So well said, Wes. So thanks for taking the reins on that one. I will say, from the Alliance for Children model as well, just speaking from more of we call it TBRI, which is trust-based relational intervention. And sometimes we, need to ensure that we're meeting the families and kids where they're at when they come through our doors. And sometimes that is kind of rebuilding the trust and maybe establishing some guidelines, which can be somewhat considered, forms of discipline, essentially. But as Wes said, there's always a positive goal that we're trying to reach to, enhance these positive characteristics of the kiddo, to help them feel more comfortable. As we mentioned earlier, some of the signs and symptoms can also be risk-taking behavior, right? And maybe that's leading to these, times where the kiddo does have to be disciplined. And I think, as Wes said, if there's not a positive goal that you're trying to, reach towards with that kid, whether it's reestablishing trust or establishing those kind of rules and guidelines that keep them healthy and safe, that's a big disclaimer between, leaning towards the end of abuse and, again, that more payback mentality versus a nurturing mentality behind it.
Yeah, that was so good. I love that thinking through is like, are my choices in discipline seeking connection and kind of restoring? And, I can kind of relate to that with one of my kiddos who sometimes has a tendency to lie, particularity to lie. If they've done, like, they've been sneaking or done something, they'll kind of lie to get out of trouble. And We have talked about, it's not like a reactionary thing. Oh, I'm offended that you have lied to me. And so you're going to be disciplined for that. But like when you lie to me, it breaks our connection, it breaks our relationship. This breaks our trust. And so talking through, yeah, there's a consequence that's coming with it. But the consequence is because I don't want us to have a relationship that is broken. So I love that whole analogy that you gave there. What fences should we as parents implement to prevent our child from experiencing abuse, outside of our home or from people who come into our home? What are y'all's tips for that?
Well, Carrie mentioned TBRI, which is typically a model that was developed with kids that were adopted and that are in the child welfare system. However, it's really based off attachment. And the first fence that I think about is if a parent doesn't make sense of their past and the experience that they had as a child with their caregiver, um, they will have blind spots as it relates to how they interact with their kid. And so, Emily, you mentioned lying. Lying may be a major trigger for a parent, and that may be something that leads them to do some things that they wouldn't normally do if they were thinking about it in the right type of context. So that's the very first thing is I just say that, hey, let's make sense of our own past, and it's going to help us sort of work through how we connect with our own child. And so there's a number of fences though that we can do, and I mentioned protective factors. And so when we are attempting to model for our kid how to have appropriate relationships, and they are developing social skills, they are gaining the confidence to learn how to interact appropriately with other people. And they themselves will be seeing the signs of unsafe and safe people. And there's also practical ways, and Carrie mentioned one of those, the body safe, I think, curriculum that they teach is that's just one little piece. I'm going to stop talking so that Carrie can throw in some things here. So
Well, you're so well spoken, Wes. So I was just happy to listen. But yes, there, of course, there's some obvious fences that you can allow from the internet standpoint of being able to monitor that activity. Again, talking to your kiddo about what it means to use that tool in a positive way and not a negative way. Certainly, helping put up fences by how Wes said with establishing that good behavior of how to interact with the people around you. We have some educational components where we will teach the kids about welcome and unwelcome touches and what that means. We also talk about, I forget the technical term of it, but essentially what like an appropriate secret is and what an appropriate secret isn't. Which can be very prevalent in abuse cases as well. But of course, just more obvious signs as well, like really understanding who you're leaving your kiddo with. A lot of times we'll use the policy of where we'll have at least two adults with one child. So there are multiple eyes on the situation as well. But those do kind of help create some protective barriers, if you will, for the kiddos that you're trying to keep safe.
I'll also add, I mentioned earlier, parenting is hard. It just is. It's not easy. And there needs to be an openness for us to receive support from family and friends and from services that are in the community, and not having to feel like you have to go it alone. I mean, we are culturally and just we've changed the way that we have society sort of built. And one of the things that I think will help really turn the tide is strengthening in our communities, and in particular, making sure that we offer support to others, but also receive support from others. Now, in the midst of that, there is a certain level of risk, and I think we would all agree that if we don't know who our kids are with, and we may feel a little nervous about that, and I think that's appropriate in terms of like making sure that we know who our kids are with, and we have a certain level of trust as it relates to who these people are. And the person of two is something that our agency does for sure, as it relates to trying to make sure that kids are safe and that they feel safe. That's super important. In the home, a balance of structure and nurture, which is something that comes out of TBRI, is an extremely important way to interact with your kids. You're paying attention and caring for the nurture piece, but you're also providing the structure and meeting the physiological needs. All of those things boost that child's confidence, and it provides them also an opportunity to voice. And if we are working with our children around them expressing their voice, so when you give choices, you're not just giving them choices. I mean, all of this is teaching that child protective, or providing the protective factors in order to address the potential challenges that they're going to face in the community, at school, wherever it is, where there's other people. And so when we are providing structure and nurture, and giving that child voice, they have an opportunity to take care of themselves, and they'll have more of that confidence to do that.
Oh, that was all super good advice. I'm like, I'm like a bobblehead over here. I'm like, yeah, yeah, that's good. Um, when you first started off answering that question, Wes, about one of the best things parents can do is consider their own like relationships, and that can be true whether they were in an abusive relationship with their childhood or not. We all have kind of triggers or things we wished our parents had done differently, et cetera, so forth. That made me think that we have a podcast called Mom Fashions Podcast, and we have one episode that I participated in called Parenting After Abuse. So what do you do? My greatest fear, right, is for my children to be mistreated, because I come from that background, and a fear of repeating kind of my family cycles and mistakes. And the way, through my own therapy and counseling as an adult, the way that I have framed it in my mind is having to change my defaults. So, what were the defaults that were modeled for me, and that I have more of a tendency to repeat? And I have to acknowledge those defaults are unhealthy. But then I also have to replace that with something that is a healthy alternative, or a way to diffuse or walk away, et cetera, so forth. So I can personally, relate with that as a parent now of two girls, trying to do the best that I can, not only in my own home, but also trying to create those fences around my girls so that they're protected, and or feel confident enough and safe enough to be able to tell someone if they're being hurt. Okay, so one of my last questions here, and we've kind of touched on a little bit, but I want to be more straightforward to kind of wrap up here, is if we do suspect that a child is being mistreated, whether it's our own child, or a friend, or a neighbor, someone from our church, just a child that we're coming in contact with, what are your recommendations for what to do and how to handle that situation?
I mean, one of the things that I would say is that there are things that you will say to yourself. So if you see a kid and you're like, I'm wondering, is there something going on in that family, or if there's something going on at the daycare or wherever, you can talk yourself out of action. The thing about it is that when you report child abuse at the DFPS hotline, they are the ones who make the determination. You simply have to provide the information that you've seen that leads you to suspect that something is going on that isn't right, and that this kid is being harmed. And so you can do that, and you can do it in a way that they don't ever report to that family who it is. They don't. They keep that private. So I would like to, one, just you can be taken off the hook as it relates to those questions that you might ask yourself. Um, the thing is that it's better to be safe than to be sorry. And if you are suspecting that a child is being hurt, um, take that phone. It's 1-800-252 5400. Pretty sure that's it. I've called it a bit. So yeah, 1-800-252-5400. And that is how you can reach the Department of Family and Protective Services in order to report abuse. You can also do it online. The FPS has it on their website. They have a button you can click, and you can do it via the internet. So there are two ways that you can definitely do that.
And just piggybacking again off of what Wes said, I think some of the hesitation is still wrapped around the taboo nature of what child abuse is. And so kind of having that gut feeling of something's going on, but there's no way it could happen in my neighborhood or my church or, my community or my county, right? And so I think, kind of pushing back past your own mental barriers of understanding that this is something that's happening. As we had mentioned at the start of this podcast, we've served, I think, 6,500 kids, right? So it's something that, you just can't shy away from. It is in the state of Texas, if you see or hear or see something happening, you're legally obligated to report it. So, it's taken very seriously here in Texas, which we certainly appreciate. But again, pushing past those stigmas to make that phone call or make a report online. Again, the beauty of it being that you're just helping that first step towards healing happening if something is going on. And that's something to always remind yourself as well.
Okay, the number is, what did you say? 1-800-252
5400.
5400. Okay, we are going to do this. There it is. You can call that. You can write it down if you need to. I want to say thank you very much to the two of you for taking time out of your workday, your afternoon, to visit with us. As a reminder, Carrie is from Alliance for Children. That's their website right there. Carrie, is there anything you'd like to share with the people watching today? Anything coming up they need to know about?
Sure. Well, we, and I failed to mention this, but we also have our lovely family advocates in-house with us here who really kind of shepherd our families along in the healing process. And one of the things they help us with is our Camp Blue, which we do 2 times a year. And so these are for the kiddos that are graduated or near graduating from our counseling services. And we do a week-long celebration for them. So we have one coming up at the later portion of June, I believe June 20th, around that time. Yes, 20th through 25th or 4th there. That's coming up, as well as our back to school event at the end of July, where we offer full hairstylists, barbers, backpacks, pretty much anything to help a kiddo feel prepared and ready to go for school. And that should be July 29th and 30th. But again, we have all of this on our website, and social media is an amazing tool. So feel free to give us a follow if you feel so inclined to be involved in any of those ways. But again, it is Child Abuse Prevention Month, so we have lots of online resources as well. If you're wanting to look into more of what it is to give your kid a cell phone or talk to them about body safety, we're more than happy to help and accommodate with that.
Our friend West from ACH Child and Family Services, is there anything that we need to know about coming up soon at ACH?
Well, I mean, I would like to just say, this is an excellent opportunity because of what you're doing. I think with Fort Worth Moms and what you're providing is an opportunity to strengthen the community. So maybe you're watching it and you're taking some tools to sort of work with your own children. But this provides also the opportunity for you to be a part of the community in a different way. And I'd like to also say, you may be a mom and you've been watching this, and maybe you're concerned about the way that your husband is treating your children, or maybe there's somebody in your family. We do have services at ACH. We have Real Help for Real Life, which provides counseling free of charge to families with kids ages 6 to 17. And so it's an opportunity. If there's family conflict, we see it every day, and it's not uncommon. To learn how to deal with family conflict is just a part of figuring life out, and you don't have to do it alone. We provide services that can meet you after school, during school, on Saturdays. And so how you would do that is if you go to the website there, you can see there's a contact button, and you can contact our AIRS department, assessment, intervention, and referral services, and get set up for counseling or for skills. We have parent groups as well. So we have something called Real Families, and Carrie and I both mentioned TBRI, Trust-Based Relational Intervention, and that is the basis of that class. And we've got wonderful individuals who lead those groups. You can be a part of a group and strengthen relationships among parents at the same time, learning some specific skills that could help you with your child. And so that's, I guess, what I would say. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on here, and what you're doing is wonderful. So thank you.
Thank y'all. We will also, after we conclude this panel, we'll be uploading it to the Fort Worth Moms YouTube channel. You can also find us on Instagram at FW Moms, and we will also be publishing an article that will not only include this embedded video, but we will also give specific links to all of these resources and services that y'all have mentioned. In fact, when you see me looking down, I've been taking notes and like, yep, we want to add that one. We want to add that one. So that will be coming up soon. We'll get that published this week. And again, thank you both for taking time out to discuss this really super important topic. So that's it for now. See y'all later.